Hello and welcome to PowerSpeaking Live. I'm Carrie Beckstrom, the host of this monthly series and the CEO of PowerSpeaking Incorporated. I'm going to kick things off by admitting to you a pet peeve of mine. I really don't like it when leaders use the expression change is constant or the only constant is change. For many employees, change can be very stressful. It can call into question concerns about your job, their ability to provide for their family. Words matter, and the pace of change can feel relentless. For employees, that often means stress, uncertainty, and the constant need to adapt. And for leaders, oftentimes the difference between disengagement and resilience can come down to one thing: communication. And that's what we're here to explore today: how clear, authentic, and strategic communication can make or break success during times of change. Together, we'll explore a number of practical approaches leaders can use to not only inform, but to inspire confidence and alignment during times of change. And joining us today are two very accomplished leaders that I've had the opportunity to work with in a variety of capacities. So I'm delighted to have them here for this conversation. First up, I'd like to introduce Donna Faria. Donna is a strategic communications and reputation management leader with 22 years of experience across a range of communications and marketing disciplines. She has experience working with private equity, public, and corporate environments through critical periods of transition and transformation. She's a progressive and pragmatic leader with recognized expertise in organizational and cultural change, employee communications, marketing, and strategy. Donna, welcome.
Thanks, Carrie.
I know you're joining us from across the pond and it's evening for you. So I'm extra grateful that you're here for this conversation.
Glad to be invited. Thank you.
All right. And also joining us is Beth Zampieri. Beth, I just mispronounced your name.
It's okay. It's common.
Zampieri. Zampieri. Okay. My apologies. It's important to get words matter and pronunciations of words matter. So Beth, thank you for joining us. Beth comes with extensive background in program and project management. And like Donna, Beth, I know you've had the opportunity to apply your expertise across a whole host of disciplines. Time and again, you've seen the measurable and meaningful impact that a comprehensive change management strategy can bring to transformation. Your background spans operations, marketing, finance, and sales, which enables you to effectively partner with change managers and leaders across an organization to ensure that transformation is embraced, adopted, and most notably sustained. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I must say, I was a little distracted because I don't think we've ever had an entire room of people joining us. This is so delightful. I'm used to looking at all the different frames and seeing individuals. And in this case, we have a full crowd. Yes, let's wave. Join us. For all
Those are my friends. Those are my friends from WSFS Bank.
Oh, so great. Yes, I love the waves. I could see the engagement is already going to be just fantastic. Those of you in the audience, I really urge you to join into the conversation. If you have questions or your own recommendations, please put them in chat. And John Warren answered the question that I posed at the outset, which is, what's your favorite change management communication tip? John says, listen more deeply to the members of the team. Yes, John, that is one of many things we're going to be talking about, which is the importance of ensuring you're involving employees, those frontline people in the change process. So let's kick things off. Beth, I'd like to start with you. When you reflect back on your career during times of significant change, what role has communication played in that process?
Well, Carrie, you said it at the start. Communication makes or breaks any change initiative. End of statement. End of statement. It is that human element of change that is going to deliver on the ROI you've committed to in your business case. So it is so critical that your audience be engaged early, often, across multiple channels with a consistent message. And I think you're going to hear a lot of that from Donna and I through this session.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really, really love that you brought up the point about early and often. In conversations, we were chatting yesterday, and Donna, I know you were talking about the fact that often bringing you and others with your expertise in was an afterthought. So yeah, it's super, super important to be proactive about that. And I'll just share one example of a significant time of change in my career where the way the leaders chose to communicate significantly impacted my and other leaders' ability to adjust to the change. I was part of a company that had been acquired by a much, much larger competitor. And I was a member of the executive team of the company that was being acquired. And the suits came down from headquarters. And the first leader that I came in contact with from the acquiring company literally said to us in a very smug, seemingly uncaring tone, I recognize that you're going to need to marinate on this news for a bit, but you'll adjust. As if we were slabs of steak, a mere commodity that needed to just let the news soak in. And I literally left that day thinking about my exit plan. The next day I came in and we were introduced to the leader who had been selected to lead the transition. Thankfully, he was not the suit who talked about our need to marinate. And the very first thing he said was, I fully recognize that where you stand on an issue depends on where you sit. And know that we're in this together. And it was clear from that moment that he was going to take a very thoughtful, inclusive approach to the change management process. And I continued to stay with that company for another 19 years. Words matter, as I said at the outset. Donna, let's bring you into the conversation. What, in your experience, is one of the most common misconceptions leaders have about change and communication in particular?
There's actually two that I see time and time again. So when I go into an organization and we sort of discuss the change that's about to happen, a lot of leaders believe that this is a one and done. I've done a town hall, I've sent an email, that's it, my job's done. Not realizing, well, actually, do people understand it? Do they understand their role in it? So you sort of see that quite a bit. The other misconception, and I see this a lot in operational environments, is they'll say, well, we're going to cascade the message, and we've spoken to our managers, or we've emailed what we want them to speak to their teams about. And I'll say, well, have these managers been trained in how to deliver a message that, is complex? Do they understand it? Do they understand what it means to the organization, to them, their teams? are they positioned to be that spokesperson? And you often get well, they're managers. I'm like, does it mean they know how to communicate it? So they're probably the two biggest misconceptions that I think would trip leadership up before they even got out the door. So if they do that, then the change is not going to be communicated well, and it's not going to be adapted.
Absolutely. Obviously, you see Beth and I nodding vehemently. Completely agree. And I've seen that time and time again. And I really want to underscore the importance of investing time in preparing the frontline leaders, those frontline managers for the change, because in my experience, they're often overlooked or addressed in, a very transactional, one-time way. They also are often far removed from the why. What triggered this change? Right? To be able to really talk to their team in a meaningful way that can help them understand and accept the change. So thank you for pointing that out.
Carrie and Donna, I'll just add one hack that I've implemented in some prior roles to address just that on how to engage the managers. Is it sometimes if you're announcing this big change, right? Because there's typically that first big bang announcement before it's cascaded. We've had a meeting before that big bang communication with just those managers. And it's a great opportunity to engage that group and really educate them on the why. And when this was initially introduced to me in a prior role, I thought, well, really another meeting before the meeting? But I was completely sold after seeing how the managers felt so much more comfortable and confident and competent in communicating that change as it was cascaded down.
Great example. Excellent. Yeah, it's not a mere email. It's an actual conversation. Great. So Beth is already getting into some great practical how-to. Donna, can you talk a little bit about your process? What's the process that you go through to come up with that comprehensive change management communication plan and to act on it?
Yeah, sure. So I think the biggest thing to start with is making sure that all of the leaders are aligned on the rationale of change, because you often find they're not. And if you have to get everybody on the same page, and once you have that, you then need to look at all of your audiences, because it's very easy to become quite siloed, to think, well, I need to communicate to our colleagues and forget about your suppliers, your customers, the media, if they're one of your audiences. So I think to start with, you've got your rationale for change as to what's happening, then all of the details that sit around it. Then it's separating all of those audiences to say, what is it that audience needs to hear? Not what do I want to tell them? You have to have a real mix of what do we need to share with that particular audience and what is it that interests them. You also can't do a blanket approach. If you have got different audiences that sit within offices, that do night shifts in a warehouse, that are drivers, their needs of information are going to be all very different, and their channels are going to be very different as well. So once you have all of that laid out, you really need to be then really specific on who is going to communicate what and when. What is the order of communication? If we are cascading, have we trained those leaders? As Beth said, so crucial to have those meetings beforehand with those managers to say, are you comfortable with the core message? Are you comfortable with the questions you may be asked? We often produce Q&As for the different audience as well to support the managers, to say, if you're asked these particular questions, here's what your answer is going to be. It needs to be very clearly laid out step by step as how the whole process is going to go, not just for that month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. Transition doesn't just happen in one go and then it's done. You have to keep telling people about it. You have to keep updating people about it and making them come along the journey with you, rather than sitting there feel that something is being done to them and they are just receiving information. They're part of it. And you need to make everybody feel that they are really part of this journey and that they've got a voice. So for me, it's definitely the planning, and you've got to be right there at the beginning. And then it's really appreciating your audience needs. Because if you don't appreciate them, all you're doing is you're just doing like a push model of we're just going to give you information and we don't really care if you're listening or not because we've told you now and that's it. So you don't get any engagement. It just makes sure everybody is fully prepared and that everybody sticks to the same hymn sheet.
Wonderful. There was a lot there. And, with any aspect of communication, taking an audience-centric approach is so critically important. And I really appreciated the importance of going through all of your stakeholders and how do you need to, what do they care about and how do you tailor that message in a way that's really going to resonate. A few things going through my mind. One is, as we were talking about at the outset, the pace of change does often feel relentless, and especially with the degree to which AI is upending a lot of aspects of the workplace, upending some jobs. Given the rate of change seems faster and faster and faster, what advice do you have, Donna, on doing that thoughtfully, but also often rather rapidly?
I think, unfortunately, we've all fell into this trap, as you spoke about earlier, Carrie, of constant change. Okay. So whilst we are seeing change and we're seeing it at probably a larger level than we would normally, change has to be embedded. So it's almost like this mantra everybody keeps saying, but it's not actually really that true. Because if you make a change, you have to embed it, you have to then measure it, you have to see if it's working before you can look to make another change. Or you say, no, this is it. This is now working. I think it's being open and honest with everybody you're communicating with, laying out a 2-year plan if you can, getting as many people involved. But I think we need, as organizations, need to stop saying, well, we're continually changing. Change has become too scary. It isn't. We're continually learning. We're learning, actually, that's going to help me in my job, so I'm going to do that. It doesn't mean it's a change. It means we're learning to use either a different tool or a different channel. So I think for me, we need to step away from calling everything change.
Yeah.
And only really calling those change elements as, no, we are fundamentally changing for this reason. And that's when you build a project around it.
That's super helpful. So oftentimes it's in the framing.
But very much so.
Yeah. Thank you. Beth, what's one simple practice every leader can adopt today to communicate more effectively during change?
Well, I'll say before I give my one tip, I'll say if your company is lucky enough to have invested in change management professionals, they have an entire toolkit that can help you craft these messages, empathy maps, impact assessments. There are multiple methodologies out there that can really aid. So a communicator, a leader shouldn't feel that they're on their own, right? And having to do this all by themselves. There are experts out there who can really invest the time and support you. So I'll just put that plug. Hire change management professionals. They can help you along the way. So the second, if you don't have that investment within your organization, there are still easy ways for you to enhance your communication. One simple thing, as you're communicating out around a change initiative, I talked at the beginning, you need to communicate early, often, consistently. One thing that will help is to have a standard communication channel. A template. So let's say you've committed to sending in weekly updates on a certain initiative every Friday. One of my colleagues at WSFS Bank set up a standard template that has, in essence, the who, what, when, where, why, how of the change. And it's this type of template that forces the communicator to really be concise and compelling and accurate in what they're communicating out. And even better, a consistent format allows the person on the other side to digest it and intake it much faster.
Excellent advice. We use frameworks throughout all of our workshops, and they're invaluable in helping you to structure a very clear, coherent message that is much easier to consume. And to your point, Beth, it's also really aids the person crafting the message to make sure they're doing it in a clear, concise way and not meandering all over the place. Yeah, fall back on those templates, those frameworks. Excellent. Donna, how do you adjust? And you talked a little bit about this, but can you build on how you adjust your communication approach depending on the audience, whether, it's your clients, the executives, you have, you, you name it.
Yeah, sure. So this actually builds on what Beth's just been talking about, and it's those frameworks, those templates, because you've got to make sure your core message stays your core message. That cannot deviate. It cannot change. What then sits below that is the message that the different audiences need to hear. And that's really boils down to understanding your audience, because an executive is going to have a very different need to a driver, someone who works within, say, the marketing department, or somebody who works in one of the hubs, during the day or during the night. So it's really understanding what their issues are, understanding how they like to be communicated to, and then you really tailor that message to that relevant audience. You've got the exec. A lot of the time it's bullet points to the point. They've got a very, very short space of time. So you've got to make sure that after your core message, theirs is very concise. When you're coming down to the drivers, they want to get out in their trucks. They want to get going. So when are you going to speak to them? How are you going to speak to them? What channels are you going to use? The best way to do it is literally pick up the phone and call one of the managers and say, right, we have this message. What channel would you suggest we use? What's the best timing? What's the best day? Because the day often catches people out. We'll often say, we're going to communicate this on a Tuesday. We'll say, well, actually, no, because that's when we actually have the split shifts. It's a lot harder for us to communicate. Work with your managers. They're the ones who know their people. Communication. They know what their people's concerns are, how they absorb information, and the best time to catch them. So I would say literally just talk.
I love that, Donna. So often the obvious is overlooked. The best way to figure it out is pick up the phone and call the manager. What time and method would be best for you and your team? Yeah, do not do this in a vacuum. Thank you. Beth, what are common communication traps that you see leaders fall into?
The biggest one, and Donna highlighted this earlier on, but I think it's such a big trap that it's worth fleshing out. It's this one and done. So many of us who lead programs or projects will have that project kickoff where the sponsor will lead off the why we're all here. And then the sponsor goes away, right? The communication has been sent, it's been delivered, check the box, that's it. While that kickoff is absolutely critical and the voice of the sponsor is so critical, it has to be maintained throughout the life of the project. A change management expert that I had the luck of working with a while ago said this thing that's really stuck with me. If you want people to follow where you want them to go, you need to meet them where they are. And if you are not communicating consistently, you're going to have the rumor mill, the hallway whispers. You're going to have your audience all scattered with different perceptions. And that makes meeting them where they are so much harder. A simple communication, weekly, bi-weekly, webinar, whatnot, it helps keep people center and at a constant level of knowledge. That way, once you're ready to keep them and have them progress, you just have to meet them where they are. And it's so much easier.
Oh, yeah. Excellent. And I yesterday when we were talking, even if you don't have new news,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And sometimes that's the most important time to say, right? You know what? We don't have an update, but I wanted to communicate out that this is still a top priority. In the coming weeks, we're planning to do this, this, and that. Next update is coming 2 weeks from now. Look out for the email. Like as simple as that.
So important, because that's the other misconception I often experience with some leaders is that I'm just not, it's not appropriate for me to communicate until I have all the answers, until I have all the information. And as we all know, it's very easy to detect when something is afoot, when something's up. And in the absence of communication, we make it up. And it's often much worse than the reality of the situation. So, yeah, I really like that. I like the consistency of the framework and even the consistency of the cadence. So, maybe every Friday morning is when the team can expect an update. And that update might be no news, still a priority. We'll keep you abreast.
Well, and Carrie, I think the thing you're touching on and that we haven't really said yet is that it maintains trust, right? Because that is such the critical element of communicating any change is maintaining that trust with the impacted associates.
Yes, yes. Very, very wonderful segue. I have a few questions related to the importance of building trust and reducing resistance. Donna, how can leaders strike a balance between being transparent about uncertainty, which we were just talking about, and not overwhelming people with too much information?
I think it actually starts with trust, them trusting you. So the leadership, so normally it can often be the CEO trusting you as a communication expert to help them guide them through this time. Because we all have this belief that as a CEO, they're not fazed by anything. They're they know what the changes are. They're quite happy with the changes. Well, half the time they're pretty much as nervous as we are about these changes. They've got a board to answer to, or they've got to make this work. So by them trusting their communications expert is when you can guide them through look, I know you really want to get all the information to everybody, but that 30-minute video you're thinking of to give a year's worth of change is not the right way to do this. Okay? People need it in bite-sized bits of information. So, and as Beth said, keep it clear. It could be that every Friday we're going to update you on these specific topics. If there's nothing to say or no change, we will simply say, we have, there's been no change, there's been no updates since last week, but we are still working on it. So I think it's break everything down to bite size, make sure it's audience centric, that you're giving the right messages to the right people. I think if you do what we've all seen so many times of, I don't have that bit of information, so I'm going to keep quiet and I hope that nobody will notice. A bit like your children do when it's near bedtime and they think if I go silent, they won't notice I'm here. It's very much that sort of ethos. And you sort of go, actually, no, because all people do is they make up their own narrative. And it isn't done maliciously. It's done through somebody guessing and somebody overhearing what they're guessing is going to happen. And all of a sudden, that misinformation becomes the most relevant information. And that is when you are on a slippery slope, because it can take you months, even up to a year, to pull back the fact that people have made up their own narrative, which isn't true. So I think it is that gaining that trust, and it's being not scared to say you don't know how to do this. So
it's almost like, Donna, you're almost describing like an insurance policy, right? You're investing in internal communications and change management as an insurance policy to maintain that focus, that trust, that adoption.
Yeah, because as we know, in sort of any sort of organization, everybody's information is the most important. Everybody thinks their project's the most important. I've been with organizations who have said, can we have a press release on this? And I'm like, no, not really, because the media won't be interested in this, but you obviously have to say it in a really nice way. And it's great they have that enthusiasm, but it's thinking if you bombard people with everything you want to tell them, it becomes white noise. It's like the leaflets through your door. They sort of land on the mat and they go in the bin. Well, that's what's going to happen if you continue just to put volumes and volumes of information out.
Such sound advice, and I love that you likened it to your kids suddenly getting really quiet around bedtime. Beth, I'd love if you could share a specific example. Can you tell a time when communication helped reduce resistance during time of change, and how specifically was that handled?
Yeah, the example I'm going to share, I think, touches on a lot of the themes we've talked about of consistency, frequency, cadence of the message, letting it go lateral and down. So several years ago, I was supporting an end-to-end service transformation that impacted every aspect of our business, people, process, and technology. One thing that I'm so proud is that our sponsor recognized how critical associates were to ensuring that success. And so he made sure that associate communication was the top priority. We brought in a change management lead who leveraged all the tools in his toolkit to support the development of a surround sound communication campaign, right? So it started with that sponsor-led communication to all impacted associates and this is the critical part, everyone hears the same message at the same time. So then from there, that message was personalized. The theme didn't change. That core theme that Donna, you referenced, that didn't change, but it was personalized and cascaded down and across the organization to meet the teams where they were. So we had a whole communications team that developed an arsenal of comms, right? So we had a PowerPoint that we had managers share in their weekly team meetings. We set up a hub on our intranet site. We had a team chat that people could send their FAQs to. We talked yesterday about how important it is to recognize that not all associates want to be communicated to in the same way. So using things like Poll Anywhere, where those who may not be comfortable raising their hand and asking a question can submit their thoughts in an anonymous manner. But the most proud element of this communication for this service transformation was when it came down to the manager-led element of it. And this is where that training is so important. We were in a situation where associates' positions were at risk. There was going to be a reorganization. We didn't know what it was going to be and who, but it was coming. And so this leader had about 10 people on their team. She pulled them into a conference room. Instead of standing behind a desk, she came to where everybody was, sat down in a very open manner, put her notes down. She was not reading off a script. And she spoke in such an empathetic tone of, I know this is scary. I know there's going to be change. Let me tell you the why. I'll give you a chance to ask questions, and I'm committed to continuing to give you updates.
Such a wonderful example. Such a wonderful example. And if I recall, Beth, because I happen to know the leader you're referring to, she even acknowledged that there will most likely be jobs impacted.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And to those people that were in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And that she committed that she was working with human resources to make sure that any of those changes were communicated properly and enough time was allowed. But yes, it was that genuine communication that was just candidly, it was part of her style, right? So I wasn't surprised to see it come out. I think it can be trained, but it also helps to just have it be part of who you are.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And that's so essential to the component both of you have talked about, which is the trust factor and how essential that is to effectively help people navigate through change. And part of ensuring that you're a trustworthy leader is that candor. I mean, I'm not being naive. I know there's some things we just cannot communicate, but not to sugarcoat a situation that clearly is going to impact some people's jobs. And we have something from Izzy. Start with the why. So important. People need to understand and connect with the why before they're ready to consider the what, how, and when. Yeah. Thank you, Izzy. Absolutely spot on. And those of you in that big conference room, in your individual frames, please, if you have questions or your own advice to share, I really encourage you to join the conversation. So, Donna, we've talked about the importance of consistency. Can you talk more specifically and maybe an actual experience that you had? What happens when leaders fail to communicate often enough or well enough during times of change?
Yeah. Okay. So several years ago, I was brought into an organization who were changing their entire claims system and department of 250 people. So it was a very large department, and they needed to change in order to save a specific amount of money because the process didn't work. What was fit for purpose 20 years ago wasn't fit for purpose now. So what they did was they made all of these changes about the process or the systems, absolutely everything, in a locked room. So when they came to communicate it, they simply did a town hall in groups. So they actually did split people up into groups, told them all the changes, handed them an information pack, and literally sort of went, go on your merry way. This is fantastic. Of course, what happened when I joined sort of close to 6 months afterwards, we said, okay, well, how did that change go? And they went, well, no one's done it. they've all just reverted to how they work. Not one person has actually took up the new change, and we don't know why. And I said, well, you built it in isolation, and you didn't actually ask the people who did the job how things work. So there was bizarre workarounds, like the F2 button didn't work, but if you press the F6 and the F8 together, it did what the F2 button was going to do or should do. So there was really small things that this group of people did not know. And so I said, right, we need to totally scrap this. But what we've got to do, because you haven't got buy-in, you're certainly not going to hit your target, is we need to stand up and say, or you need to stand up and say, right, we built this in isolation. It did not work. We need your help. You are the ones who do the work on a day-to-day basis. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some sign-up sheets. We've broken the project down into small chunks. And if you're an expert in one of those areas, please sign up for a workshop. And because we are then going to build this with you. Very much also left it with a real firm understanding of why. Why were we doing this? Why did they need to save this X amount of million? What was happening? What were the frustrations? As soon as they had that, and as soon as they communicated that really clearly and did we built it in isolation, the take-up was incredible. The whole system was overhauled, every process was overhauled, and they achieved what was meant to be their 2-year ambition. They achieved it. I think it was something like within 12 to 18 months they achieved it. The buy-in was very impressive. But I remember standing in the room and saying to them that Gallup had done a survey, and I look at this survey every 2 years. And it says if you do not communicate effectively during times of change, you can lose up to 23% of your workforce. Because people become insecure, they don't like the direction of the company, it doesn't fit their moral compass anymore, lots of different reasons, but all of it driven by this lack of communicating why we were doing something, what impact it would have on every single every audience and individuals. So I would say look at your bottom line. Because if you don't communicate this effectively, you're going to lose some of your workforce, a good chunk of it, and that's going to have a massive impact on your bottom line and your reputation.
Absolutely. Yeah. The bottom line impacts are real and very, very significant. And the other thing that's going through my mind, and I can't remember the exact stats, but you referenced Gallup. Every year, Gallup, among many other things, releases the workforce engagement rates. And we know the trend line is moving in the wrong direction. I mean, engagement is continuing to go down. So we're already in a precarious situation where there's, in many organizations, a lack of engagement. And if you layer on to that poor change management communication, it's extremely problematic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that example. How did the leaders, and I just want to compliment you on your courage to provide that honest, open feedback. How did the leaders take it when you helped them to understand why the change wasn't working?
Well, I sort of did a bit of a divide and conquer, if I'm honest. So I went to the sort of the head of the department who was leading the change, and I had an individual meeting with him and was very candid about why it wasn't working, and that I was going to speak to his management team about why it wasn't working, but I needed his support. Because I thought, I'm not going to take this project on if he wasn't supporting. And I think it's just almost being brave, being bold, sit there and say, you may not like what I'm saying, but look out and see the reality. The reality is you have 250 people who are doing exactly the same as they were doing 6 months ago. So I also use another a visual that I've used for years, and it's that every organization is split into those who help build the organization, those who sit in the middle, then those who actively try and destroy the organization. And I said, what you're doing is if you create so many people in that middle section, they're going to go one way or the other. You need them to go to the building. I said, building the organization. The way you're going and you're not communicating, they're going to go to the destruction side. Once you have that, it's very difficult to get that back. So I think it's just having that open and honest conversation. You're not saying they've done something wrong. What you're saying is, I'm an expert in this area. You're an expert in yours. Let's work together.
Great, great. And that's that image that you described is very, very powerful. Thank you. Rachel's contributing here. She said Gallup's 2025 report says that engagement has fallen most dramatically among managers. That again underscores the importance of bringing them into the conversation, preparing them, setting them up for success. Yes. Beth, in moments of upheaval, what words, actions, or communication practices most help people feel confident and resilient?
Yeah. So, I mean, Carrie talked at the beginning of, companies are evolving, learning, changing constantly, right? And that's a good thing, right? Because we are constantly learning and adapting to the environment. Um, but in times where there is more meaningful upheaval, I would challenge a leader that if you think you need to just communicate, maybe have 2 town halls, 5 emails, and you're done. No, multiply that by 10 at the least. And I know leaders are going to say something to the effect of, I ain't got time for that. And that's okay. I get it. I'm here to help. Your change management team is here to help. Donna, I'm sure you have ghostwritten communications a million times. And the reality is, in these times of significant change, the associates want to hear from their leader. They want to hear from their leader and their immediate manager, which is just what we said just a minute ago with the Gallup results. So ensuring that you are communicating more frequently, that you are engaging those managers. And I loved what one of the participants said, focusing on the why. That is the biggest thing. So my key message is you have to communicate 10 times more than you think you should. And I know that requires a lot of time. So entrust your communication experts, entrust them to learn your voice and ghost write for you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Let's talk a little bit about the role of technology in this process. AI, collaboration tools. Donna, can you share some examples of how you've leveraged technology?
Yeah, I actually think COVID played a huge part in how we work now, because before we would all be in offices and all of a sudden we saw people dispersed across the country, across Europe. And I mean, the role I was in, it was across Europe. And so all of a sudden we were saying, well, we've got to communicate this transformation. How are we going to do it? Because before we would get people physically in front of each other and we would talk. So the different platforms you've got, so the likes of Teams, webinars, etc., they all of a sudden came into their own. We could use those effectively. We knew how to use those to make sure that everybody heard the same core message at the same time. So I think they definitely have their place. Chat, GPT, all of those, I think, very much have a really, really solid place when you are writing something. So I always said to my team, if you are writing a summary about a complex situation, a complex problem or a process that is happening, go out into the street, not literally, but imagine if you went out into the street and you stopped two 16-year-olds and you shared that with them. Could they give you a bit of a summary as to what you were trying to say? I said, if you have, you've actually then, you've actually demystified a really complex situation. AI does that for you now. So instead of having to sort of pass that round and go, is this correct? Is this right? I've had meetings with lots of executive heads of department managers, and they've said, well, I've written this, but I'm not sure if it actually resonates. And I say, just put it through AI. Ask them to summarize it. See if that summary matches what you want to tell them. I said, if it doesn't, come back to me. Come back to one of the team. We can help you on that. If the summary comes back and you say, that is absolutely spot on, that's exactly what I want to say, you've got it right. It also helps you soften the messages. It can help you say, this isn't slightly pressure, or can you pull this bit out a bit more? So I think it definitely has its place. Polls is the one I think that has really changed how we use transformation. So in a previous role, we shared a transformation we were doing, and it was sort of really putting down into bite-sized chunks of, I think it was like 10 parts of this change. In order to make sure people understood what we were what the core message was, how it impacted, then we did a live poll during one of the webinars to say, okay, do you understand this? Because if you don't, we're going to put some workshops on, we're going to communicate in a different way. And it allowed people anonymously to say, I don't actually get that. and not be embarrassed by it, because you could look and go, okay, people really didn't understand that. Or the other side of it is people really understood what this means to them, and people really understand why we're doing the change, or we're communicating the changes we are. So I think it 100% has its place. I don't think it can replace communicators, because it doesn't have that empathy and it doesn't have that ear to the ground or things like that. But I think it really, really helps. And I think the polls is the one that I use the most, by far, to when I'm sort of communicating a change or getting execs to communicate a change, because it gives us that in that real time, people's actually understanding of the message. Because if you don't understand it, then it's just words.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to your point, it's a really, really safe way for employees to provide genuine feedback, because if they're having to do it publicly, oftentimes that's filtered for obvious reasons. So yeah, getting that real-time pulse check is so critically important. And also, earlier we were talking about the importance of obviously having that core message that's consistent, the why that's consistent, but then tailoring the message to your many different audiences. And that can be a lot, a lot of audiences. Just like now you can plug in your buyer personas into AI and get back very targeted, personalized message to align with each of the personas. You could do that with AI with all your stakeholder groups. And that can save you a lot of time in the tailoring. And then, of course, refining it to make sure it's truly authentic in your own voice. So let's close out. If you could offer the audience just one golden rule for leaders to follow as it relates to effectively communicating through change, what would that be, Beth?
So my golden rule would be to remember that communication is not for you as the leader. You've already bought into whatever change you are putting into the organization. Your communication is for the associates that you are 100% dependent on in adopting that change for you to deliver on the ROI that you committed to. So what this means is that you need to communicate more than you anticipated. When I was part of this service transformation that I referenced earlier, I was part of that communication roadshow. And I came back to my office after what felt like the 100th time presenting the same presentation. And I called my change management professional and said, if I have to communicate this one more time, I'm going to vomit. And his response was, great. That means we're almost done. And the humor there is intentional, because you have to communicate more than you think you have to. Because again, the communication is not for you. It's for the associates.
100%, Beth, 100%. And the almost ready to vomit is a great barometer, and one that will be memorable, I have no doubt. And Donna, before I go to you, I want to address a question that Jenny Chen raised. Thank you so much for your feedback, Jenny. And the question is, we absolutely will make the recording available. So everyone who has joined and or registered will receive the recording, and they're also available on our YouTube channel. Donna, what's your golden rule to close out with?
My golden rule is be human. You are talking to other human beings. It is okay as a leader to say, it's going to be bumpy. I appreciate this is tough. It's okay to feel how you feel, because as sort of, Beth said, they've heard the message, they've bought into it, they understand it. Okay. But the people they're talking to have heard it for the very first time. And it's very much that example of, somebody sitting down and saying, look, let's talk. The fact is, we're all human beings. Just start talking to people like they are. It's okay to say things are going to be tough. And it's okay to say that they're a bit nervous about things. It just makes them more relatable, and it makes people feel that they're in this together, rather than it is one side making the decisions and then they're just the side that's just hearing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. be human. Excellent golden rule. Beth, Donna, this has been a terrific conversation. And I love how you complement and build on each other's advice so exceptionally well. It's clear you're steeped in this. And it's also really clear you care. You care a lot about the impact on the employees and their ability to be success and the company's ability. So thank you so much for joining the conversation. Thank you also to our audience. Communication creates communication. It works in two directions. Yes, so true, Merle. So true. All right, let's close out by introducing the topic that we are going to cover next month. We're going to talk about frameworks, the many, many, many different kinds of frameworks that can make you a more effective, compelling communicator. So I hope you can join us next month for this very useful conversation.